Welcome to another episode of Twist of Lime, starring Agrippa Dean, Aurelia Duncan, and Cyrus Lee. Today, we will be telling the story of the Second Triumvirate of Rome. After Julius Caesar's death in 43 BCE, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus formed the second three-man ruling group to govern Rome, also known as the Second Triumvirate. They vowed to seek revenge on Caesar's murderers and attempted to stabilize the Roman government, but their differences resulted in conflict. Episode 1: The Death of Julius Caesar. By the end of the First Triumvirate, the people and Senate of Rome began to fear Caesar due to his conflict with Pompey, a member of the First Triumvirate, and his thirst for power. They became afraid that they were living without a voice, as Rome was quickly coming under the control of a would-be tyrant. After his death in 44 BCE, the Republic was thrown into disarray, and three men formed the Second Triumvirate with the sole intent of salvaging the government. Episode 2: The Beginning of an Unstable Triumvirate. From the start, the relationship between Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, Mark Antony, and Lepidus was unstable. Although Mark Antony and Octavian would soon resolve their differences, they initially distrusted each other, having previously waged several military campaigns against each other in northern Italy. One of these campaigns included the Battle of Mutina in 43 BCE. Octavian was victorious over Antony in the Battle of Mutina due to Antony's heavy losses, which eventually caused him to retreat. Antony had been a supporter of Caesar, and he served as his general during the conquest of Gaul and the Civil War, where he was appointed to administrator of Italy. Each of them believed that they were the rightful heir to Julius Caesar. Antony furthered the disputes between the triumvirate by cutting off Octavian's access to his stepfather's, Julius Caesar's, money, and angered Octavian by giving Lepidus the title of chief priest, the most important religious position. Antony's obvious battle to become Caesar's heir caused the Senate to label him as a tyrant and declare him and Lepidus, due to him supporting Antony, as public enemies of the state. The trio eventually formed an alliance due to their common goal of avenging Caesar's death. Octavian had the support of the majority of the army and those loyal to Caesar because he was Caesar's stepson. Although people had to be at least 33 years old to have a consulship, Octavian, who was only 19, forced the Senate into granting him one with the help of his many supporters. Octavian immediately enacted the Lex Padia, translates to Padian law, a law condemning anyone involved in Caesar's death. Episode 3: The Power and Purpose of the Triumvirate. In 43 BCE, Lepidus, Antony, and Octavian formed the Triumvirate, which was basically a constitutional commission with as much power as a consul. In other words, they managed to dupe the system and create a shared dictatorship while gaining complete control of all Roman land. What a time to be alive! On the surface, they looked calm and ready to drop bombs, and every part of the government looked just about the same as it had before. The government functioned just like it always had, but the sole purpose of the triumvirate was to restore stability to the Republic after the assassination of Caesar. This allowed them to enact laws without the approval of the Roman Senate, and they were granted supreme authority for 5 years. Speaking of Caesar, you might be thinking, what in the world happened to the assassinators and other conspirators? Well, the Second Triumvirate was tasked with capturing those evil conspirators, specifically Brutus and Cassius. And they ended up condemning 300 senators and over 2,000 knights. To be honest, I don't even know how they managed to find so many scapegoats. And in fact, the enemies just ended up making it harder for themselves. When the enemies of the triumvirate fled, and abandoned their property and belongings. These were sold and used to fund the condemning process, a total crackdown on all enemies. Among one of the condemned people was Cicero, who was accused of conspiracy. Cicero, who was very outspoken, believed that Antony was an enemy of the state and should have been killed. This, as you can obviously tell, didn't sit well with Antony. Cicero's hands were cut off and he was decapitated. His body was later displayed in the Forum. Yeah, the Second Triumvirate was a group of some cruel, bad boys. And this all led to the Lex Titia, which became official on November 27, 43 BCE. The Lex Titia gave each triumvir official and legal status, thereby allowing them to make laws, issue decrees, appoint governors, make wars, and act with powers superior to that of any magistrate of Rome. Yeah, they had a lot of power. Seriously, a lot. In addition, each member possessed specific territory. Antony held Gallia Cisalpina and Transalpina. Lepidus had the remainder of the Gallic lands, and nearer and further Spain, while Octavian received Africa, Sicily, and Sardinia. Lepidus was to govern Italy, while Antony and Octavian dealt with the immediate crisis of the liberators, who were Caesar's assassins, and the remainings of the Republican forces. Now the Lex Titia was very important. The power it gave to the Second Triumvirate basically allowed them to control and share a joint dictatorship where they all had the ultimate superiority, capable of completely disregarding republican and senatorial traditions through the use of military force. This was a significant difference between the First Triumvirate arranged by Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus around 16 years earlier, because the First Triumvirate was really just a secret pact that forced the three men to pledge mutual support to each other. With the Lex Titia being officially written into the Constitution, it basically marked the end of the Roman Republic. Episode 4. The Fall of the Triumvirate. Lepidus's expulsion. Now finally, just like you expected, the third man was left out, and this time it was Lepidus. In 37 BCE, although successful in the east, Lepidus was kept out of the renewal of the coalition due to his continual failure in battle, so Octavian banished him. What great friends! While Lepidus went crying home with virtually no power to fight back, the empire was equally divided between the two remaining friends, or should I say, partners. Octavian ended up taking the west, while Antony took the east. Just like what happened in the First Triumvirate, now there were two left to rule Rome. So much for the Triumvirate. But wait! Now, even the tensions between Octavian and Antony started to flare. In fact, there was this whole saga with Queen Cleopatra from Egypt and such, but more on that to come later. For now, all you need to know is that while Antony was being defeated by the Parthians and falling under Queen Cleopatra's spell, Octavian destroyed Sextus in 36 BCE at Naulocus. Yup, Sextus was finally taken care of. That victory brought about the destruction of Lepidus as well, since battled Lepidus tried to stage a coup, but failed miserably, where he spent his remaining years being humiliated by Octavian. Episode 5. The Fall of the Triumvirate. Antony, Cleopatra, and the Battle of Actium. But back to Cleopatra. Like I just mentioned, Antony and Octavian were never truly the best of friends, and while they were able to settle their differences for a while, ultimately it never worked out. While they were partners in the Second Triumvirate, they had tried to make the best of it, with Mark Antony marrying Octavia Minor, Octavian's sister, but Antony later left Octavia to go back to his mistress Cleopatra VII Philopator, the queen of Ptolemaic Egypt. Antony even had kids with Cleopatra, promising his kids some land and power. Ooh, how scandalous. As you can tell, this obviously pissed off Octavian. To make it even worse, it was discovered that Antony was planning on giving Cleopatra some of the Roman land, and was planning on establishing a second Senate in Alexandria.
However, even this much was not enough for Octavian to convince the Senate and the people of Rome of Antony's anti-Roman sentiment, until 32 BCE, when finally, yes, finally, Antony expressed his desire to be buried with Cleopatra in Alexandria instead of Rome, and even went as far as divorcing Octavia, and this was enough of an excuse for Octavian, the Roman Senate, and the population of Rome to declare war.
While Antony was an excellent commander on land, he was never able to prove himself capable at sea. So Octavian and his trusted right-hand man Agrippa forced Antony and Cleopatra to fight on water. On September 2nd, 31 BCE, the decisive battle was fought. Trying to prevent Antony's army from outflanking his own, Octavian strengthened his sides. However, Antony and Cleopatra quickly broke through the middle and sailed away. A great victory for Antony, right? After all, he's alive and still with Cleopatra. Not so fast. While Octavian had won the tactical battle, he had also left his entire army behind and lost his reputation as an honest and honorable captain, who would stay to fight for his soldiers. Yeah, what a great guy. Demoralized, his army soon was quickly defeated, and his troops even began to switch sides. Joke's on him, so much for loyalty, am I right? Finally, in 30 BCE, Octavian pursued his enemies to Egypt and laid siege upon Alexandria, where Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide.
Now Octavian began to rule by himself, and being continually re-elected as consul between 31 and 23 BCE, the Roman Senate decided to give him the name Augustus, meaning the August or exalted one, in 26 BCE. Yeah, that's the Augustus you always hear about.